Welcome everybody to the Central Oregon Fly Tyers Guild. This is our 13th meeting, and we've got 5 more left. So I want to introduce John Kreft, and most of you are already familiar with this young man. And John's going to take over the meeting. So John, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. And if you can make me host again, I guess, so I can share my screen.
Okay. Just a second. Okay.
Here we go. Okay, welcome everyone. If you don't know me, my name's John Kreft, and I have a website. It's called Riverkeeper Flies that I just celebrated 8 years of Riverkeeper Flies, and that was actually my post for this week. So a couple of things. Actually, it's not even part of my presentation. We've been talking about deer hair for sparkle dun, seems like consistently. And one of our sources in the past has been blue ribbon flies, and then they weren't able to have any inventory for their sparkle dun. But recently they put up a post on their weekly newsletter that said that they had some back in stock. And I just happened to order some today, and they're estimating that they will be out of stock on Monday. So if you are interested in purchasing some sparkle dun, it has been good in the past. I can't vouch for what it is this year. I'm supposed to get mine shipped tomorrow, but that's the source. So you can go out to their site.
So John, I have a question. You just told them that's what you wanted and how much? And trust them to pick the right one?
You just go onto their website and order it online.
Okay.
They have sparkle dun and Caddis deer hair in stock right now. So this is my website and the home page, and I just wanted to show that that this Guild Zoom class button right there, I've put it on temporarily on my website. Sherry is working on a Guild website, but I wanted to get the schedule out there, and then what I've done is to link to her YouTube channel for those instructors that have already completed their session. So that's an easy way for you if you'd like to use that. Tonight, I'm going to break it up a little bit. If many of you have seen a lot of my flies over the years, they've mainly been dry flies. And what I wanted to do tonight was to show a couple of nymphs. So I do fish nymphs on occasion, not often, but these are a couple that have been effective for me. So this is a golden stone pattern that I found from McPhail, and he's a terrific fly tyer on YouTube, and I've made a couple of adjustments to his, so we'll call it a variant, and that's what I'll tie tonight. The one on the left is a real insect, just to show you what they look like. This is probably a 1 or 2 year old nymph that is not mature yet. He probably has another year of life in it, but they will be, as they grow, they'll be different sizes. So if you wanted, you could tie these flies in different sizes to replicate those. So here's the fly pattern sheet. And the hook, there's a couple of them that I'll show you in just a moment. The thread, I've got a yellow that I'm using. I'm using a gold bead, a tungsten or a brass bead, and we'll use lead for the underbody. The back is thin skin. And for the body, the dubbing will be Spirit River UV2 Caddis Nymph dubbing. Tail is a goose biot. Small gold wire for the rib. Legs of, I'll be using Life Flex tonight. And then continuing with the thin skin for the thorax cover. So if you take a close look at this picture, the fly on the left is what I'll tie tonight, and it has a round bead. The other beads were from the Flyman Fishing Company, and they have anatomical heads that are really creative. I don't know whether the fish care or not, but I purchased a few of these and ended up tying them. The other thing I wanted to mention is that as fly tyers, we all go crazy on trying to find different hooks and comparable hooks. So the picture, the one on the left is the one I'll tie tonight, and it's on a curved shank hook, and I'm happen to be using I think it's a TMC tonight, and it's a size 6. And if you look at the middle one, that's on a Daiichi 1730, and it's a bent shank hook, so it's about 1/3, 2/3 with the thorax area bent, so it actually looks a little more realistic. But that's a size 8, and look at the size difference of the hook between the size 8 and the size 6. Then for comparison purposes, the one on the far right is a size 6. And so the fly on the far left and the far right are both the same size hooks, but they're a lot different in terms of what they're going to look like. One isn't good or bad, it's just different. So let me tie it. And I would encourage you to, you're certainly welcome to ask questions as I go through. I think Sherry will watch the chat because I won't be able to watch that. And let me change cameras and we'll get to time. There. Does that look pretty sharp still, Sherry?
It's a little blurry.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks good.
Let me do this.
That's clear.
Okay. And I'll put on my glasses so I can see. So as I told you, I'm using a curved hook tonight. And I've already attached the lead. So I've got about 10 turns, 9 or 10 turns of lead wire. And what I try to do, I try to get the size of lead that will fit into the opening of the bead. And so I've got that shoved up into that as much as I can. For the thread tonight, I've got some Danville, and it's 6 so yellow. And I'll start right behind where I put on the lead. And what I'm trying to do in this area is to create a little bit of a ramp. And if you've seen me tie, I will consistently flatten my thread as I go through. I'm trying to just put a few wraps of thread around the lead to secure it. What I've found is that if I add a little dubbing now, it helps as I come down around the hook. For the dubbing, I will be using this golden stone. It is Spirit River UV2 Caddis Nymph. And this is the color. If you tie this fly, you will learn your dubbing technique because it's a whole bunch of dubbing. So you notice when I dub, I pull out a little at a time and just use your thumb and forefinger and a little moisture to create a, I put a little dubbing on at a time. And I will create or fill this space right between the lead and the hook, and then go back down the hook. Might be a little bit too much. So I've gone just around the bend. The next step, I will add my thin skin. So if you've never used thin skin before, it comes in a sheet. Get it out of the block. And it has a backing on it. It's just a solid sheet. What I do is take an X-Acto knife and cut strips. Got a couple here. And if I'm tying them in different sizes, I take one that I've already used and I mark the size on it. And then I use this as a template. If I were to create more, I can just place it on here, get a ruler out there, and use an X-Acto knife and just cut strips. And that's a really effective way if you're going to tie a lot of these. So the question is, how wide should this be? And I want it, if I pull out that other fly again, I think you can see that I just want it around the edge of the body. And so that's your goal. And if it's a little wider, that's probably okay. Once it gets a little narrow, it doesn't quite look as natural. The fish may not care at all. Once you strip it off, it just looks like this. So you can see through it. And it's got, both of them are kind of shiny, but one is a little bit duller than the other. And I want the shiny side to stick up, so I will tie that down. And what I will eventually do is pull that over the top. And so the shiny side will be up. And I like to just create a little bit of a tie-in point here over to my waste receptacle. I'm just going to make kind of a point to tie it in. And the reason that I tied in that dubbing to begin with is that I found that I will be a lot more successful wrapping this if I have a little bit wider area. You can see that it starts to bend around the hook. And if it was just the plain hook, then I've had problems with that. So I just want to tie that in, and I tie it down fairly secure, so when I pull it forward, it isn't going to move. Many times you start with a fly and you tie in the tail first. But in this particular case, I've done all of these other steps, and now I'll go to the tail. I'll be using goose biot in gold, but you could easily use an amber color as well. pull out a couple of these and tie that in. But before I do that, I see on my bench, I have one other piece of, so these are two types of lead. So I've used the round lead. Davey McPhail, if you were to go out and look at his video, uses these strips of lead. What you can do, he ends up just cutting them and then wrapping them around to create a taper on his fly. And I thought that was a really creative way to do, to create that taper. You'll find this lead, a lot of times golf pros use this under some golf club grips, I think it is, in order to make them bigger, so that, and a little bit heavier. So that might be a source for you, but I don't honestly know if you can pick these up at a fly shop or not. But I have a little bit of it, but I find that just using the lead wire works just as well. And you'll see as I continue to wrap this. So I'll open this up and expose a couple of biot and then just strip them off. And there will be a natural curve to this feather, and this is going down towards the tail. And I want that on my far side so that it will extend away. So I'm going to have kind of a short tail. A little bit longer than that. You can tie both of these in at the same time if you like, but I find that it's easy for me just to do them separately. And you'll notice that sometimes that thin skin is a little bit in the way. I'm just holding that onto the hook with my thumbnail. Place a couple of wraps and make sure that when they're not the same length. So we're going to extend it a little bit, and I'm going to place it on my side a little bit more so it's on the side of the hook. And now I will place a few wraps, secure it, and I'll go up to where my dubbing is. This adds a little bit of extra base to the body of the fly. And trim that. And then you'll see that I've got a problem with my tail. So you need to put this around the side a little bit more, because what's happening is that when I bring it forward, the tail is, or the thin skin is pulling that to the side. So there we go. That should work. And then break your thread. Now it's a really good time for a question if somebody has one.
I don't see anything in the chat yet.
Nobody has a question of how often we break thread?
Mostly during a demo.
And no kidding. So this all uses a learning experience, and we use these little contraptions for.
Well, we have 22 people joining us tonight.
Good. So I think my hook point is sharp. That's my guess is how I hook my thread. And then I'll be using some small gold wire, the rib. That's a good time tied in now. And I want it to go down on the bottom of it, so it's away from my thin skin. There we go. And now we're going to dub. Continue to dub the body now. This is what takes the longest for this fly. And I just try to create just a slight taper. My body is going to be about 50% of the fly. So this is about the 50% mark, but I find that what I like to do is create a little bit more of a base, just cover the thread as long as I'm dubbing this. It has to be covered at some point. So I'll put a light coating.
John,
And now,
Ed Hughes has a question for you.
Sure.
How do you keep your fingers moist when dubbing? My fingers get slick constantly and end up having to lick them to get traction.
that's what I do. I've been told that I probably shouldn't lick my fingers, but that's what I do. So I'm going to pull this forward, and this is stretchy, a little bit stretchy. So I had a problem with this tail over here, and I'll just try to make sure that it's over on the side. And with my offhand, I will start to wrap. And there's 5 wraps, and then I'll just come in front. So if it kind of locks it down. I find that if I were to hit my bobbin holder at this point, sometimes these thread wraps come loose a little bit. And just by taking one thread wrap in front, that helps to lock it down. Now we will come through here, and I don't know if it's visible, but the thin skin is about halfway down the body on each side. And so what I will do with the ribbing is about 5 or 6 wraps, and make sure that as I'm coming through, I use my thumbnail so I don't make a fold in the thin skin. And again, I will go in front. Now we'll tie the ribbing off. Just use the helicopter technique. And add just a pinch of dubbing. I want to cover the tie-in point here. And bring that forward. Now I'm going to create the first fold. I have 3 of them here. And all I do is just loosely hold that, bring it back, and then fold it forward. And just hold it with my thumbnail. And place a couple of wraps on it. Okay, there's a few wraps. And now I'm going to, I will add some legs. I'll be using Life Flex. It comes in a piece like this, and I just take those out and cut them in half, cut them in half, cut them in half until I get the right length. I also would use a brown on occasion, and if you want to change the color slightly, you can certainly do that. So I have two pieces here that for me to attach them, I'm just going to put them on the opposite side, bring it up, and let the thread hold it on top. And take another wrap, and that will secure those. And now I will hold on both ends. And just put them off to each side. What I try to do is make it the right length for the back, and then I just have to trim one side rather than trimming front and back. Now I'll take a couple more wraps just to make sure they're secure. And make sure it doesn't slide too much. And then guess what our next step is? More dubbing. Just a couple of wraps. Pull this back. Pull the legs back. And what I'll do now is finish dubbing the rest of the fly. And then I can come back with the thread to where my next location. So I want 3 segments here. And I want them to show. So this one I will add right there. Some dubbing. And after you get your proportions down and your technique, these can be pretty fast because all you're doing is dubbing. Just trying to move things out of the way. Add a little more bulk here. And the last segment then. You notice that I don't overlap these segments. I want them to be distinct and showing. And the other thing I do is reposition this occasionally just so it's more upright and able for you to manage. And I'll tie this in right behind the bead. Pull it back and make a couple of wraps and hold it upright and firm, and that will stretch it a little bit. And the trim section will fold back down a tiny bit, and then I'll cover it with a wrap or 2 more dubbing. Pull the legs out of the way. And we're ready for a whip finish. And I just want to show you again how I manage these legs. I just take the legs and pull them up out of the way. Not necessarily have to put two whip finish in, but I just want to show you that real quick, that technique. And come underneath, touch your thread. And then for the front, just going to trim them right about here. And there is a golden stone nymph. You've got your three distinct cases right there. And that's just a really effective way, I think, in order to create just a little bit darker body of what the original is. So are there any more questions in?
I don't see anything in the chat. Beautiful. Ron Geyer says it's beautiful. And I understand a little better about the dubbing in between each of the segments, because if you look at that real bug, there's all this body that's in between those different folds.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do is just cover my thread wraps.
John, have you fished this?
I have.
Okay.
It works. And you can use different size beads. You can use different. This is a size 6. I think that's the largest of this particular hook style. But if I wanted to go larger, I would use the other hooks that I showed in the presentation, because they're a longer shank hook. And so I have tied these in larger sizes. This is pretty small, but for the river I fish, my Metolius River, if I fish it there, some of the areas it's more shallow than others, and so I don't want a super fast sinking nymph that's going to just, instead of bouncing along the bottom, it'll drag along the bottom. So this is just one way in order to do this. This would be a good point fly on a Metolius year round if you wanted to get down deep.
You use an indicator with that, John?
I don't use, no. I used to, but I found that I've got better feel if I don't. And
Yeah.
I don't fish out as far.
Okay.
So any more questions on this bug? Let me move some of the things out of the way so I'm ready for the next one. I think that if you tie these, my biggest tip is to create your template. And that will make this much faster for you to get those. Then you'll end up with the curly Q. That's just how they are, and you've got to manage them. You notice that I had a full strip, and so it gets in the way occasionally. You just have to continue to pull it back out of the way.
Well, John, here's a question. Item 17 says place UV resin over the head area. That's just if you're not tying with that bead.
Yeah, you could put some resin over the top, but I've kind of gone away from that. I think this is just as effective.
Okay. No, see any
the
other
other
questions?
thing is what I probably should have done on this body is to create a little bit longer cut so it doesn't impact my tail as much. I don't think it makes any difference there as they're tumbling along the bottom, but I should tie it in right about in this spot so you can see having that down here. But that's why I dubbed some of the body first in order to create a little bit thicker tie-in point. So it allows me to stretch that without impacting the tail as much. Okay. let's go to Silvey's Caddis Pupa. Brian Silvey is the creator of this fly, and he's a guide on the Deschutes River. And this is a fly he developed years ago. So this is what I would classify as a guide fly. And it ties pretty quick because that's what guides need to do. But it's imitating the pupa stage of a caddis when it's ready to hatch. So these will be swimming up through the water column to the surface where they're hatching. And the real pupa is, there's a picture on the left and an imitation, the one we'll tie on the right. I'll be using a Daiichi hook tonight, but a curved hook, size 14 and 16. I'll be using a 16 and some, what color thread? I have some all $3 dip thread, so it's a Danville brown, a gold bead. I think this is a 2.4 millimeter. Some pearl core braid, marabou, the best use of starling I've ever seen. Some dubbing and my antenna. So I'll show you the partridge. This is the olive version. I'm wearing a green shirt, so maybe it won't pick up as well. But you notice it has the same color head for it. So it's a rust brown head. So it's exactly the same as this tan version. Now I've tied in the wings different. So on this one, they're kind of down along the bottom, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate tonight. It might be a little bit hard to see that, but that black is the starling wing. Versus this is the tan version, and you can see those kind of sticking up off the side. But the real insect had them down along the body of the fly. This is an interesting, very interesting fly. I'm going to go back to a point just shy of the hook point. I guess I should show this, I'm sorry. So I'm using the 1120 tonight. It's a curved hook, size 14. And pearl core braid. This is a hairline product, and if your fly shop doesn't have it, you can order it. And the fly pattern sheet on my website has the hairline code number so that they can order that. But it just comes in a long string like this. That's the tan. And this is the olive version. So here's a piece. I tied a couple of these today so I could try to remember how I tied them. And you're going to take a lighter and warm that and just rub your fingers around that. So you see how I did that? Let's do it again so that in case you blinked and missed. Just get it warm. And be careful, you can burn yourself if it's too hot. Here we go. And that's the tail of the pupa. So how we came up with that, I have no idea, but that's a really effective way to make that tail. So I like it to extend just past to the bend of the hook. And then I'll use my favorite zapper gap. Notice that this slides around. And I'm going to place them on the hook. And just hold that down for a minute while I put the cap back on the zapper cap. Always put the cap back on your zapper cap. And we'll just let that rest for a second. And I'll trim this. Let's see if I can start a fire, which you don't want to do. See how fast that goes? You just want to touch it and twist it, and then touch it and twist it again. So just a little bit of heat. Too much heat and it ends up in a mess like that. So that's attached pretty well. It's not going to slide around near as much. And I'll tie it down some of that. For the body and legs, we'll be using some grizzly marabou. And I will say that I used, for this particular fly, I used some dyed olive partridge. And I thought that that worked pretty well. Here's a close-up of the marabou. And you can either take this, I wouldn't take this in because this is, I like the looks of that. You see, this is more fluffy. So you could take this piece, and I'll show you what I'll do with that, or you can take the sides like this and take an extended piece of it. But I'm just going to pull off some of this. And I wanted about twice the length of the hook that I'll tie in. There's a couple of ways to create this. One is just, we want to wrap it. And so this is creating all of the, I think all the caddis are very hairy. And so what this does is creates the hair, and then the rest is the leg. And that worked actually pretty well. So I could tie that off, but I want to show you another technique as well. And that's just to create a noodle around your thread. Let it go and then hold on to the rest. And those, that will be your legs. They're off to the side right now, but that's fine. And then I'll just continue to bend that down a little bit and hold it. And that's not exactly where I want it yet, but I'm going to put some dubbing on. Instead of superfine tonight, I'll be using some UV fine and dry. I'll be using the, I'll select some of the rust color, which looks like this. So as I tie the fly, I found whenever you have a bead, there's an opening that goes down into the bead. And so I want to fill some of that for my next steps. And so I'll hold back those legs and I'll start working back, which then creates kind of a dam for those legs. Plus, as I tie on the wing buds, it's a lot easier to tie on those feathers when on a wider spot than a narrow spot just around the hook. So here's, if you're a birder, here's some of your favorite birds. And you will see some, as I select these, what I'm looking for is a little bit more round. And this is, if you've seen jungle cock, this is a poor fly tier's jungle cock. So it's got these little eyes that we can make. And that's what we're going to use for the wing buds. So I'll just take one of these out and pull some of those out. We're going to tie it in here. So that's how I would do it. I'll strip these. And that's what I would do for 2 of them. But I already prepared 2 over here. They're all ready for me to go. And these are a little more rounded than the one I had selected. So the good thing about a rotary vise is you can pull it off to the side. This is a little bit long, so I'll pull some more fibers off. A couple of soft wraps, and then I can pull these into position. We'll do that for the other side. When I first tied these, I had a lot of problems with this step. Well, I hope you can see that. I'll just pull this slowly. And by having those fibers and not on a bare stem, pulls it down. And I'll hold those in place, make a couple of tight wraps, and then pull the stems back in order to get them in, snug them in place. We'll trim that. Now for the antenna, I'll either use, tonight I'll use a partridge feather, but you could use wood duck if you have it. I like that too. And all I need are 2 antennae. And if you pull them directly out from the stem, the tips align. You hold onto the barbules and then pull the feather away. Once you just place them on top and the curve is going down, extending over the whole fly, And one more little dab of W. Actually, more than a little dab. These Caddis pupa have a pretty big size head. So I'll hold everything out in place so it's not going to move too much. And the thing about Caddis pupa, they can be messy, but that's what the real bugs look like. And once those intend to get wet, they'll slide back. And how you would fish that is use this as a dropper off of a real caddis, or perhaps a chubby Chernobyl or something, and just let it swing up in the water column when the caddis are hatching. So any questions on this bug?
I don't see anything in the chat. I really like the step-by-step instructions on these, the way it's numbered on the handout.
Okay.
It makes it easy to remember how to tie it.
Hey, John, do you have luck with that, with the antenna staying, or do you lose them after a couple of fish?
I haven't had much problem with them coming off. You
Okay.
could, if you find that you do have those coming off, you could pull the butt ends back and lock them in a little bit more. The partridge is a little bit softer than the wood duck.
Yeah.
Partridge is a lot more available for many people than wood duck, but I like this too.
Yeah.
Either one of those, they've got the barring on them. Yeah, it just kind of looks like the natural.
Yeah. I've been putting two together just with a little bit of head cement, just real thin, just lock them in, and that's helped me a little bit for longevity, not getting tore up too bad. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's gorgeous.
So as I said earlier, the Caddis pupa are just kind of a mess. And if I go back to my slide.
John, the darkness on the real one, is that because it's been out of the water?
Jerry, I think that it depends on I think that I just picked this off of the surface of the water.
Okay.
So I think that it kind of depends on which Caddis pupa it is. And this is probably an olive version rather than the tan version.
Yeah.
It was I only had a good picture of the tan version and a good picture of an olive Caddis pupa.
Yeah.
So
when you're fishing it, do you fish them closer to shore than way out into some pool or something?
No, I think that the Caddis will hatch all over the river.
Okay. All right.
I hear a dog barking somewhere. Well, this is really great, John.
So I wanted to just quickly show where on my website you can find these fly patterns. So this is the homepage.
That'd be great.
Select fly patterns there, and the stonefly, the golden stone, you'll find right here. It just says stoneflies right there, and just missed that. And then the Caddis version is here. So the last thing I have then is today, or a few weeks ago, I had participated in a podcast about the Metolius River with Steve Haig, and that went live today. So I talk about the Metolius River and what it looks like and flies we use and some strategies. So that's out there. You can either Google Destination Angler podcast or go here to Destination Angler. There's the link. You want to get your cell phone out, you can take a picture of that, or it's just as easy to Google Destination Angler. So that's the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you, John. I'll give them flies a try then.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much. John, this was really good. So let me see if I can.
Well, thanks, Sherry. See you. Talk to you later.
Okay.
Butch, say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody, and let you know that tomorrow, not tomorrow, next Thursday, we have a new presenter, Mike McCoy, is going to tie a dry fly called the Kraken and light Cahill emerger. So that'll be our next one for next Thursday. And then the following Thursday, I'll be taking Peggy Brenner's place and I'll be tying a streamer pattern called Mrs. Simpson. We'll see how that comes out. So thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, good night.
Good night.